Hello guys, and welcome back to our channel on binomials and how we can expand them when we try to raise them to the power of 3, or we call it cube. So we have already done these binomials. So here, number 2, 3, 4, and 5. So these were tackled in my previous videos. So part 1 and part 2. So now, what we're trying to solve right now would be the challenging problems. So because all the while, these are just really basic problems. But in this case, we are now going to deal with fractions and everybody's favorite, which would be the square root function. So now, let's first have a closer look at square root of x plus y to the power of 3. So just take note that no matter how complex the function would be, still what the process that we're going through would still be the same. So we can write this square root of x as x to the power of 1 half and y as y itself. So the same thing goes. So we know that this part here and the last term would be raised to the power of 3. So you can see here that x to the power of 1 half to the power of 3. And the last term, y, is also raised to the power of 3. Now, the only thing that we need to really look further into would be the second and the third expression. So for the second, we wrote here 3. So we put it down like a coefficient, then x to the power of 1 half, then squared, then times y. And since we're officially done squaring this entire thing, so it will be the turn of y squared in the third term. So 3 times x to the power of 1 half times y squared plus y cubed. So trying to simplify the entire thing, so we have a bunch of letters and variables. So in the final line, we can see here that 1 half the exponent times 3, that would produce like 3 halves, and then 3 times x to the power of 1 half squared. So we know that the 1 half times the 2 would cancel out, so we could just have 3x times y. And going to the third term, we have 3 times x to the power of 1 half times just y squared. So nothing pretty fancy. And the last term would just have to be copied, so y cubed. So now we can write this one in this way. So x cubed, the square root of x cubed plus 3 xy, then plus 3 square root of x plus y squared. So we know that these two things are just the same, and then the last part will be y cubed. So it brings us to the final answer, which would be square root of x cubed plus 3xy plus 3 square root of x y squared plus y cubed. So for the second number, we have 1 over x plus 1 over y. And we know that these things here can also be written otherwise in this form. So 1 over x, or x to the power of negative 1, and 1 over y can also be written at the same way. So just remember that negative x to the power of x negative 1 is not equal to x to the power of negative 1. So a lot of students normally don't get the difference. So the same thing as what we did in the earlier part. So x to the power of negative 1 cube plus 3. So here, 3 times x to the power of negative 1, then square it, then copy y to the power of negative 1. Then this time, since we're done with squaring this 1 over x, we would be proceeding to squaring the 1 over y. So 3 times x to the power of negative 1 plus y to the power of negative 1 squared plus y to the power of negative 1 cubed. So we've been pretty much consistent all throughout. So the first term and the fourth, and the last term would be raised to the power of 3. So negative 1 Here, negative 1 times 3 would produce negative 3. And then here, negative 1 times 2 would produce negative 2. And then just as is, so negative 1 as well. So y to the power of negative 1. And here, 3 times x to the power of negative 1 times y to the power of negative 2 plus y to the power of negative 1 cubed. So negative 1 times 3 would be equivalent to negative 3. So as what you can see here. So trying to make it into the final form, so 1 over x cubed plus 3 over x squared y. So we know that all of the variables raised to the negative power would have to be placed at the denominator because that's the only way for us to get or to remove the negative symbol. So 3 over x squared, then this one is negative 1. So 3 over x squared y plus same thing here, 3 over x y squared plus 1 over y cubed. So that would be the final answer.